This is the basic model of the Alpaca in Blender, with lighting included. I actually had to remove the light sources to do a proper shipyard view of it, so we'll take a look at that next before we look at the render of the sprite. So you see the lighting is hiding the side of it with a shadow. That's why I had to have a separate model for the shipyard view. So what I did with this version is I used it to make the shipyard view like that. The way it worked was I would render. So to render, you go to your render menu here, render image, and then you can use a camera. Now in this case I didn't, so I used OpenGL. Otherwise you would need a camera, because Blender has a lot of the same features as 3D Studio Max and all these others, and can be quite nice. But of course the downside of it is that you can end up tying yourself in knots in 3D Studio Max. My own view is that Blender is much more user-friendly for this sort of thing. And see the way it works is you have render result down here, and then you can save it. I would need to do actually image, save as image. Now, as I said before, the sprite is a little bit more complicated. We'll jump back to the original version. So if we have a top view here, again, render, image. It's not really an animation here because I'm doing it frame by frame. Zoom in, and there it is, with the lighting and everything else. It's already centered, actually. It's just my view is not centered here. And so you would save as image. And there it is. Now, another thing that I should show you, which is just as important, back to the 3D view. Of course, the next step, of course, is that I have to do the rotations. As I said earlier, it's 10 degrees for each frame. So I go over to the rotation here in the transform menu. If you don't have the transform menu, you'll have to pull it up. It's actually turning in the opposite direction of what I wanted it to. And this was the fact when I made the real sprites. But the way you would do this then is that you would render the image and just save it again. Save as image. And then you would do 36 of these, each at the correct rotation. I'll get it back to 0 here. And eventually you have what you need. So then what do you do? Well, you've got all these rendered images, and I'll show you what you do with those. This is the original render in Gimp, my favorite image editor. And 960 by 540 pixels, which is much larger than I need. Generally, as with so many things, you want to start out bigger than you need and then downgrade as needed. The only thing I dislike about what came out about this is these ribs on the engine nozzle there. But as you'll see in a moment, it's going to be so small in the game, it's not going to matter very much. So this, of course, is turned 10 degrees to the right in the clockwise direction. So it's the opposite of what we saw in my demonstration of Blender, because, as I said, the rotation goes the opposite direction of what I would expect it to. But you would say, well, this looks ready to go. It's got the gray background and so on. Well, not necessarily, because your sprite file in reality does not look like it looks in UVnew. It has a black background, typically. So you could say, well, make this black. Well, actually what you want is for it to be transparent, because you want to lay this over whatever template you're using. So this is what I did. I selected, actually I can show you exactly what I did. I selected the color, gray, and then I delete it with clear. This. And then I filled this in. I want to show you actually what this is not what I actually used. Discard change. This is actually what I got. I figured out a better way to select color and so that I don't have the nose chopped off there. So this is what I then laid over my template. And that's this. Now you can see I've layered it just for out of laziness. I used the Rebel escort carrier. So I have my background is separate. Delete the background or make it fully transparent. We remove the ship itself, the Alpaca ship. And there's the sprite for the escort carrier, which is based on the bulk freighter. Close enough, right? And see, the way I did it was when I pasted the Alpaca sprites in after, downsizing them, because you can see this sprite is 432 by 432. I just placed it over the escort carrier. You can see that. And then, how do I hide the escort carrier? Well, I could have deleted it, but I kept it just in case I wanted to change the model further, the Alpaca model. So I put the black background in between. See that? And now it's ready to go. If I save this, instead of as an XEF file, because you can see there, if I save it as something compatible with escape velocity, which would be a targa, you can see here. So you would export the image as a targa. And you're all ready to roll. But of course, I used a non-compressed one, just to be sure. No hourly compression. And I should note here that this is for the modern escape velocity Nova, not the original, because the original escape velocity used PICTs. So the targa would then be imported into EVNew, just like I said before. So that's it, basically. It was difficult to figure out how best to do this, but once I determined the procedures, it actually wasn't hard at all. This was one of my easier projects once I determined the best way to do it, and I am even debating to myself whether to build another ship in order to do a proper tutorial step by step. This will be my substitute in the meantime, as well as a promotion of this ship in case I ever actually release a plug. But in any case, I'm pleased with how this came out, and I hope this, at least description of how to build an EV Classic, let's say, EV Classic ship, will serve you well if you're planning on building any more. I think the Alpaca is the only one that's been built in many, many, many years, actually. But I'm sort of an escape velocity addict, so I decided I would actually do it, even though it's a very old game, and I don't really have a lot of time to play video games. So, until next time, thanks for watching, and I hope you found this useful.